This is my favorite feature of this episode. Previously within Microsoft Fabric, Copilot was enabled for Power BI. And now what this feature allows you to do is actually have Copilot on top of your Fabric warehouses.
Welcome back to our new episode of Fabric Threads, where we unravel Microsoft Fabric for you. I'm sure our audience is filled with Fabric enthusiasts, so I'm pretty sure they're going to be stoked to hear our first update. Dennis?
Yeah, let's dive right in.
So the first update I'd love to hear more about, Dennis, is FabCon Europe. This is an event that takes place in Stockholm, Sweden this year. Tell us more about it.
FabCon Europe takes place, like you mentioned, in September, and it's a major learning event for everybody that is interested in learning more about Microsoft Fabric, Power BI, SQL, and AI, and how to incorporate that throughout your entire organization.
FabCon Europe sounds like a great learning opportunity. Who is this really for?
This event is really for anybody within the Fabric environment. So whether they be data engineers, data analysts, even end users will get value out of attending FabCon.
And this sounds like a highly anticipated event, is that right?
It really is. FabCon back in March in Las Vegas was a massive success, and I have reason to believe that the Europe one will be as well.
So you really think this will be worthwhile in terms of investment for folks?
Absolutely. It's not just going to speaker engagement and networking opportunities. I think there's a lot of value in attending the workshop sessions as well. It'll really teach you how to integrate Fabric across your organization.
Definitely sounds like not a basic tech event. And a little birdie told me that Collectiv might be in attendance. Can folks actually go and meet you at FabCon Europe?
Yes, absolutely. So Collectiv will be at FabCon Europe. We are super excited to be there. We will have our entire team.
Okay, well, that's a great update on FabCon Europe, Dennis. Now let's talk about updates to the Fabric product itself. Can you tell us more about visual calculations and what update has just been announced?
Yeah, so visual calculations is actually a Power BI feature. So before visual calculations, you had to have complex DAX measures that you then used inside of your visualizations to end up getting the end result that you want. And so what visual calculations allows you to do is actually build dynamic calculations directly inside of your visualization rather than developing DAX measures and then using those inside of your visualization. So it's a very dynamic interface that you can reference other calculations within those visuals.
That sounds interesting. Tell me who's going to benefit from this feature.
Visual calculations has been announced really in the last 6 months. And so they have added additional visualizations into this feature. Now all of your scatter plots and your maps, you can use visual calculations inside of. So that's a huge update. And my hope is that Microsoft ends up releasing that to every out-of-the-box Power BI visual.
Well, we know Microsoft loves feedback from their users, so let's hope so. Any limitations that customers should be aware about this new update?
With any feature like this, it can't do everything. It doesn't exist in every single visual, but if you're using tables, matrices, charts, scatter plots, maps, you can use visual calculations now.
So Dennis, the next update I'd love for you to tell our viewers about is the ability to download large semantic models in Fabric.
Yeah, so downloading large semantic models has never been a feature within Power BI up until now. So for those organizations that have very large Power BI files, a lot of data flowing into Power BI, you have to turn on the large dataset format feature. And that allows you to host all of that data within your Power BI environment. And so previously, you actually had to live connect to that model to be able to modify it and build additional reports on top of it. But now what you're able to do is download that to the Power BI PBIX file, and you can actually author directly within Power BI Desktop.
Cool. So it sounds like that's providing more flexibility to do more offline. Is that right?
Exactly. So that's the entire feature, is that now you can author on top of your really large data sets. And so we're talking gigabytes of file sizes.
And who do you think really benefits from this feature update?
This is really pointed towards larger organizations that have a lot of data flowing into their Power BI interface. So anybody that has really large semantic models, this is the feature for them.
And are there any limitations, Dennis, that users should be aware about?
There are a few limitations, so if you truly have a very large semantic model, you may not be able to download that using this feature, or it just may take a very long time to download.
Okay, so this is great for large semantic models, but not too large of semantic models.
That's right, that's right. We don't live in a perfect world.
So, Dennis, the next feature I'd love for us to speak about is Copilot for Fabric warehouses. If you wouldn't mind, remind users what Copilot is in the context of Fabric and what it can do for users.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is my favorite feature of this episode. And so Copilot within Microsoft Fabric, it's really an AI tool that allows you to use the LLM large language modeling to be able to ask questions about your data and discover insights automatically. And so previously within Microsoft Fabric, Copilot was enabled for Power BI. And so you could ask questions on top of your semantic models, you could generate reports, you could use the Q&A feature. And now what this feature allows you to do is actually have Copilot on top of your Fabric warehouses.
Very cool. Sounds like help with assisted brainstorming, and who doesn't love that? Can you tell us what kind of key use cases you see for using Copilot in Fabric warehouses?
Yeah, so Fabric warehouses are used to store all of your enterprise data. And so within Fabric, you have your lakehouses and your warehouses. When you want to interact with your data using SQL or your semantic model, generally that's a Fabric warehouse. And so now what this allows you to do is actually write large language model prompts directly on top of your warehouses without having to interact with using SQL or Power BI semantic modeling. You can actually ask your questions directly to your warehouse, which is incredible.
It does sound like a pretty big deal. Who do you think will really benefit from this?
Typically, warehouses are really only used by your data engineers or your data analysts that are familiar with SQL and hardcore semantic modeling. And now, what this allows you to do is actually have your end users that have access to this data go into the warehouse and discover insights on top of that without having to interact using SQL or Power BI.
Are there any gotchas that users should consider when using Copilot in the context of Fabric warehouses?
Yeah, so with any Copilot feature, expecting it to produce a result with complex queries can be an issue. And so, generally, what we recommend is really work on your prompts when you're asking your questions to Copilot. So, be very specific around the insights that you're trying to generate so that Copilot can use that info to go query your data.
That makes sense. We're all kind of learning how to interact with AI better these days.
Yeah, there's certainly a learning curve, but once you get the hang of it with your prompt engineering, it can be a very useful, very powerful tool.
Definitely a time saver. Thanks so much for sharing the updates with us today, Dennis. And I do have a question for you. Have you already purchased your ticket to Sweden for FabCon Europe?
I have, and I'm super excited for our team to travel out there.
Should be a fantastic time. And I'd love for those viewers out there to drop us a comment about the features they're most excited about, and also let us know if you're attending FabCon Europe. We'd love to see you there.